All right. Hey, good evening, folks. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today is Monday, November 4th, 2024. This is your afternoon update on what is now Tropical Storm Rafael in the central Caribbean Sea. It is late in the season, and unfortunately, we should have quiet weather this time of the year as far as the tropics go, but Mother Nature had other plans, and our much watched system over the last couple of weeks has finally gotten its name, the 17th named storm of the season. Rafael is located about 130 or so miles south of Jamaica this evening, and is forecast to move very close to the islands, over the Caymans, and across Western Cuba over the next couple of days as it tries to intensify. The overall environment's looking a little bit better for the storm. It's starting to organize. And we will likely have at least one more hurricane from this over the next couple of days as this moves along and into the Gulf of Mexico, where the forecast becomes much more uncertain at the end of the forecast period. So it looks promising as far as avoiding a major U.S. landfall, but we still have things to talk about. So latest from the National Hurricane Center as of 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central with the time change difference. Maximum sustained winds 45 miles an hour, moving to the north right now at 9. A turn more to the northwest is forecast here soon. The latest cone from the NHC does not have any major updates. A tropical storm warning remains in effect for Jamaica, a hurricane warning for the Cayman Islands, hurricane watch for much of western Cuba, a tropical storm watch for central and a little bit of eastern Cuba, and as well as the southern part of the Florida Keys and the Dry Tortugas, also under a tropical storm watch. So Hurricane Center cone, pretty self-explanatory here in the short term. A steady northwest motion forecast over the next about 3 days, or maybe even 3.5 days, taking this thing right over the Cayman Islands, very close to Jamaica, over western Cuba, and then putting it out into the Gulf of Mexico, guided pretty much dead along by high pressure over Florida and the Bahamas for a couple days to come. On this forecast track, it looks like the Cayman Islands are going to get a hurricane strike, and Cuba could potentially be looking at a stronger hurricane strike, or maybe even a major hurricane strike if a few things break a certain way. But then it goes into the Gulf of Mexico, and the forecast cone becomes much more uncertain. You see this kind of lazy motion off to the more of the west-northwest. And this is when we think the storm may begin to encounter some more significant wind shear and cooling waters. And we think that it might have a harder time getting to land. And if it does, it might be much weaker than what is currently forecast. Forecasts have looked good for the Florida Peninsula. It does not look like this is going to directly track over Florida, although associated moisture from the storm will bring parts of some heavy rain to parts of Florida, and it will increase that onshore flow. So eastern Florida may see some pretty strong kind of nor'easter type conditions. But the only effects for Florida right now are going to be in the next couple of days the southern Florida Keys that will be getting some kind of tropical storm and rough surf out of this. Let's go ahead and look at the current satellite presentation as the sun sets on the true color satellite imagery. We can see that center of circulation tucking up under there. I got to reload this as it doesn't reload the last frame or two. You can see a little bit south of Jamaica here, a tighter core of stronger winds and a little bit better organized core is developing under that thunderstorm canopy. Still a little bit of wind shear on the storm. The center of most of the thunderstorms are a bit off to the east of where that low-level center is formed, but it is getting much better organized today. Hurricane hunters have been out there throughout the day from the Air Force Reserve flying out of here at Keesler. They have been finding a steady drop in pressure. Earlier today's flight found a central pressure about 1,006 millibars, and this evening they found a last check central pressure about 997. So the central pressure has fallen a decent bit actually in the last several hours. I was at 1745 Z. This is about 5 hours later at 2040 Z. So in 5 hours, about 9 millibars. So it is steadily strengthening right now, possibly quickly strengthening, depending on your take on it. And the hurricane hunters actually did note that there was a partial eye wall forming. So that's a bit of note. Another teal is getting in there right now. And they just dropped into the storm a little bit south of Jamaica, so we don't have their stuff yet, but they're probably going to find a bit stronger storm from there. So already tropical storm and on its way upward. Water vapor satellite shows that the environment is improving for Rafael this evening. This is an upper level low trough moving away from Cuba, and this is starting to move back, and this is expanding that canopy of winds beneath the storm. An upper level high is starting to build in. This is allowing the air to kind of expand aloft of the storm and allowing air to evacuate away from the storm. So this is generally the environment a system wants to be in for better intensification. If we watch that area north of Jamaica, notice how these clouds are starting to expand in two different directions. Definitely something that we see for a storm that has started to get a better environment. The water is very warm, and it looks like there's a pretty good chance this is going to intensify quite quickly over the next day or two. Again, very likely going to be a hurricane strike on the Cayman Islands and potentially a hurricane or strong hurricane strike on the western part of Cuba. From there, this is when the models begin to diverge. We look at the GFS here and we see this moving across the tip of Cuba on Wednesday afternoon and then moving into the Gulf of Mexico, where it passes as close as the Florida Keys at 0Z Thursday, which is about 7 or 8 p.m. local time. So the worst for the Florida Keys would be around this time of the night, or time of the day on Thursday, so late Wednesday basically into early Thursday morning is probably where the worst it'll be for the Florida Keys. Moves across Florida, and then again, it gets kind of close to Tampa on the GFS. Some models bring it a little further offshore, but this is far enough to where you'll have secondary effects, some minor water rise at the coast, a little bit of gusty winds, some rain, but the worst of the weather would be offshore of the western coast of Florida. Again, I don't think there's going to be a whole lot more eastward adjustments on this. It looks like it's probably going to wind up west of you guys, and even if it comes a little bit closer in totality, maybe a few more rightward adjustments, and it comes in something like that, you still aren't going to likely get a direct hit from this. It'll probably be far enough offshore to miss some of the worst of it, but we'll keep an eye on that for Florida in case things change from that regard. But we do not forecast some kind of like hard hook over the peninsula or something like that. It looks like it's all going to have to eventually get forced westward by this strong high pressure that's moving over the southeast Atlantic or the southwest Atlantic at that point. From there, the GFS brings us up towards the Florida coastline, peninsula in the upper Gulf Coast, Mississippi, Alabama, even Louisiana. And on the GFS, it pretty much keeps that steady northwestward motion all the way into landfall. But you'll notice one thing that happens is it goes from the 980s, which is probably a hurricane, and it weakens all the way back to 1,004 millibars, which is barely even a tropical storm. That might be a tropical depression at that point. Very common theme with these models is showing a significant weakening trend in the Gulf of Mexico. So again, Euro brings it across, and the Euro sees a much stronger high pressure and actually diverts it more to the west and kicks it out into the Gulf and never lets it come near the Gulf Coast. So that's kind of the two different avenues that we're looking at. The track guidance shows this well as well. 18Z models, very split. There's like 3 distinct camps here where the GFS kind of solutions come up at a steady northwest motion, land somewhere, say between Biloxi from Alabama over into western Florida. And then there's a group of models that kind of just skirt the middle and kind of wind up close to Louisiana, New Orleans, maybe western Mississippi. And there's kind of this third camp of models that see much stronger high pressure and kick this out to the west. I think that somewhere in here is probably about your bet right now. I don't know if it's going to get that far north that fast, but one of the things we're looking at, and we'll show this on the different models, is the timing of this low over Texas and the kind of Four Corners area. So big upper low pressure. So the jet stream kind of comes in like this, goes out, another branch of the jet stream goes across, and you have this big upper low moving in through Texas and trying to turn northward. One of the big differences is the Euro sees the overall ridge. This is beneath much stronger. The Euro has like a shortwave ridge right here, and then it has kind of the long wave ridge kind of neatly kind of ridged over the southeast U.S. And this is going to kind of block the storm. This kind of blocks the storm from trying to get much closer than that. It kind of creates this barrier that forces the storm to deflect off to the west. GFS looks, if I switch over to the GFS, it looks about the same, right? But there's a few key differences. The trough is a little more progressive. There's a little bit weaker ridge, and the ridge is kind of busted up where the 588 line kind of cuts down over Florida, and then another part of the ridge kind of cuts down right here. This overall strong area of winds is closer, and it kind of lets this barrier go away, and the GFS sees it kind of following along and being able to move further north. So it's a small, but it's kind of an important difference. Like, notice how this 588 line stays kind of connected all through here, and then if I were to do this, and then I go back over to the GFS, the difference is, the model has that busted up. So that's kind of one of the things we're watching is how strong this trough is, how much it erodes the ridge, and how much does this let it come further west or further north, or does it not? I think that the storm will be able to move some component north, but it'll definitely be slowing down. That puts it slowing down over cooler water and a much higher wind shear. This is the GFS wind shear map on Tropical Tidbits as we get into Thursday into Friday. You can see it's entering this much stronger stronger area of winds. And this area of red on here is deep layer shear. This is strong, deep layer wintertime shear, which is even worse than, like, say, during the summer where your wind's more on the upper levels only. This is a wind that's through the mid levels of the atmosphere and even the lower to mid levels of the atmosphere. Much stronger wind shear, much deeper and uniform in nature. And it is very, very uniform across these models that show this weakening. The 700, 300 millibar relative humidity actually shows it really well. Model shows the system coming off Cuba, and notice how that plume of moisture already working into Florida. So rain, beneficial rain, will be heading for Florida and some of Georgia and the Carolinas as well. They've been very dry since Helene, so some welcome moisture comes up and around. But then notice how all that moisture begins to get ripped away from the storm. Notice how it's green. The greens are around our low, which is what we want as far as the hurricane's concerned. And then the greens get ripped away, and then it's just left with this dry air. So when you combine dry air and strong wind shear, it's usually a recipe for some kind of disaster, for a hurricane, and usually induces some pretty quick weakening. This is also uniformly shown across all our hurricane models. We're following the storm along as it moves over the Caymans, across Cuba as a pretty strong hurricane. I mean, this brings in at 971. Some models like the HAFS bring in even stronger over Cuba. Passes very close to the Florida Keys early on Thursday morning, late Wednesday night. Still 972, still a hurricane off the coast of Tampa Bay, close enough for some wind and rain, but not close enough for anything major. But then look at what happens right there, 969, and then boom, all that dry air gets in, and look how fast this weakens over the course of the day on Friday. All that moisture gets ripped away, and that is like powerful wind shear, showing this thing just getting ripped to shreds. And that's the coast of Louisiana right there. And you see that within a day, as it approaches Louisiana, it just gets absolutely battered. So this is something all our hurricane models show, even the some of the other ones. I'll show you the most aggressive one we have right now. I'll show you the HAFS Bravo run. It's still running its 18Z run, but same thing, 953 before it hits Cuba. And there's actually a good historical precedence for storms strengthening south of Cuba in this area, so it definitely could get pretty strong. I think it could be a category 2 or 3 as it moves over Cuba, and then it gets across Florida, but then it kind of holds 980, 970. But then same thing, all that moisture begins to get ripped away. The wind shear gets there, and it just drifts into the Gulf Coast as basically a windy, slight rainmaker. I mean, it would have a hard time even making much rain in this case. So that's kind of the differences right there in those tracks. Uniform track guidance shows it peaking in about 72 hours, which is right about when it's leaving Cuba. And then all the guidance, 96 hours and beyond, shows that downward trend of it weakening into the Gulf of Mexico. GEFS ensembles show that range of outcomes, but shows you that potential landfall pressure not very high at all. And looking at Tomer Berg's website with the ship's forecast, high chance of rapid intensification in the next 2 to 3 days, about 50 to 60% above normal for this time of year. But again, if you look at the 4 or 5 day graphs on some of these charts, look at how much the wind shear increases, look how much the relative humidity decreases, and look at the sea surface temperatures decreasing. All of these factors indicate that the system will have much less heat content to work with, less relative humidity, and much higher wind shear. So the confidence, again, is fairly high that this is going to start to weaken to the Gulf of Mexico. The question is just how fast does it move north, and does it have enough juice left when it gets to the coast to bring somebody at least a tropical storm? So that's what we're going to have to find out. It's going to be a couple days before we know that for sure. Folks along the Gulf Coast, you need to keep watching it. We're watching it here in Biloxi, and anywhere from, say, about New Orleans to maybe Destin, or even a little bit further west in Florida. Should keep an eye on it. Could bring you some rain for the weekend, and I'll definitely make a rainy end of the week across the peninsula of Florida. But right now, unless you're in Cuba, the Cayman Islands, or Jamaica, we're not looking for this to be anything overly strong as of now. But we're going to follow it along. The rest of your tropics are quiet today. Patty dissipated over the Azores Islands. We are watching another area later on this weekend and next week over the Azores. So, small chance of development over the next couple of days. Not the Azores, the Greater Antilles and Bahamas. We'll have an area that tries to spin up down here after Rafael moves along, but it'll be a couple days, and we'll just be something. There'll be something to watch until then. So that's what I got for you guys today on your tropical update. As always, thanks for watching, and have a good one.